Hey guys, this is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks for your support. Please like, share, and subscribe. All that fun stuff. And definitely leave us any comments in the comment area. Um, Today, I'm very happy to invite and have on the show Ralph Friedman, who is a New York NYPD decorated officer who's done a heck of a lot and has an incredible story. And I'm very happy to have him on the show. Ralph, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Um, I'm gonna just I'm gonna throw us a couple of questions, and we'll kind of work it from there. Um, my first question would be so people get a little bit more familiar with who you are and what you've done. Even though I can see behind you, it's like a it's like a museum. Um, just to give us an idea, first, I mean, I would like to know, I'm curious myself, what what inspired you to become a police officer to begin with?
Well, I never thought of becoming a police officer at all. Never even entered my mind. I was doing very well when I got out of high school. I was a furniture mover and I was making good money at the time, 4.50 an hour, which was a lot of money. Everybody was making like $1.15 an hour. And I was working out and I was moving furniture. It didn't bother me. I was doing well. And then one night I was out with a couple of friends, and I said, "What are you doing the next day?" It was a Friday night. I said, "What are you doing the next day?" And they said, "We're taking the police test." I said, "Are you kidding me?" I never even thought of it. I had no friends or family that were police officers. And I said, "Well, knock on my door. If I get up, I'll go." In those years, it was a walk-in test. You didn't have to register prior, and it was being held in the high school I graduated a year ago. So they knocked on my door. I went, I took the test, and then the rest is history. Then I thought about it, and I said it'd be a good job without a college education. I'd be moving the same furniture on day one that I would on 20 years later. So I took the test. I did well. They called me right away, and I became a police trainee because I was too young to actually be an officer. So I did exactly 2 years to the day and indoors. And I was like chomping at the bit. And beginning of 1970, February, I became a police officer and enjoyed it.
Wow, that's an interesting story. So fate would have it that you would be involved in this career, basically.
Yeah, I never thought about it. I had a few interactions with the police, but it was just some fights in the neighborhood, and I'd always say, "Oh, I'm on the list. I'm on the list." I'd get like a JD card, and that was it, juvenile delinquent, but it wasn't an arrest or anything like that. And then I went into the academy and proceeded from there, to go from uniform after about a year. I went into plain clothes for 4 years as anti-crime, and then I became a detective, and I still continued to do similar to anti-crime work. I was in a detective squad, but I specialized in guns and robberies.
So you were based during the 70s and 80s, you were based in the South Bronx in that area, correct?
Well, I was in the South Bronx for 5 years, and then 9 years I was in the North Bronx. But it was Bronx detectives assigned to the 52nd precinct area.
What,
We went wherever the case took us. If it started out in the North Bronx, it could take us anywhere.
right, but you also worked with the 41st precinct, didn't you?
Yes, I was in the 41st in the South Bronx, which was known as Fort Apache. It was a very active area.
So during that time period, because I grew up around, you're obviously older than me. You're like 10 years older than I am. But I grew up in the Howard Beach, Rockaway Park area. And I remember back then, you know, even though we kind of made fun of cops, we did respect them. And we had a lot of respect for them back then, regardless of the fact. Um, so did you find that even though the 70s were a lot of very lot of turmoil and things like this. And did you come across that any kind of pushback back then?
Well, there was always a few cop fighters, that we ran into, but it's nothing like it is today. Today, it's like a culture or something. There's a movement. There's a total disregard and disrespect for the cops and for the law. You
Yeah,
know,
I don't even want to touch on that yet because I will. I will get into that.
okay.
That's what I want to get into when we get into something current. Um, I'm sorry if we went on a tangent a little bit there, but
Well, the South Bronx was a lot different than Howard Beach. You know, um, the South Bronx was a ghetto, and the ghetto, the drugs are very prevalent. A lot of heroin. It was all heroin, and then the city came in and they put in methadone, which is the same thing. But there was a lot of street crime, violent street crime. There was shootings, stabbings, because of the drugs, and it was just a very violent area and a very violent time in the city's history.
well, there was a movie that was made out around that time period, and I think it was in the late '70s called Fort Apache, the Bronx. Um,
Yeah, but that wasn't, that showed some of the area and how it was, but the story itself wasn't really a true story. It was loosely based on something.
so it would, but but the movie it did capture the lifestyle at that time, correct?
Well, close. It was actually a lot worse than what they
Really,
showed. When
really.
you're dealing with it in real life, it's a lot different than the movies or TV would project it to be.
Ah, well, I'm
It
just
was very gritty, they cleaned it up a lot in the movie. It was a lot worse.
wow. And the one movie was pretty bad, let alone a lot worse. Ah,
Well, I have a TV series out now called
mm,
Street Justice: The Bronx. It's one season, 6 episodes, and it definitely shows it more to what it's really like. And in those years, back in the 70s, we didn't have, no one had cameras and video. We had to rent that from Columbia Pictures, and it was like $3,600 a minute. But we sprinkled it throughout the season, which was 6 episodes, and you get to see what it really looks like. And there's a lot of scenes. You'd see the buildings and the streets. It looks like Ukraine now on the news.
yeah, yeah, I know. I did see pictures
And
of it.
right now, it's on Amazon Prime.
Oh, nice. Okay. Um, Now you also back then you had about, if I'm correct, about 2,000 arrests.
I had over 2,000 arrests in my name, and I assisted in over 5,000 other arrests. I was
Right.
also involved in 15 shootings, 13 with perpetrators, the other two with dogs, but I had to shoot 8 perpetrators, killing four of them.
Now I want to ask you this question because you brought up something important. Because a lot of people don't understand what officers go through when they actually kill somebody, whether they're good or bad or whatever the difference may be. I'm wondering how an officer's psychologically, how it affects them. Because it's not like you're at war or anything, but you do end up doing that sometimes. How does the psychology of a cop, how does he deal with that?
Well, first of all, every cop, reacts differently. Just like in anything, everyone's an individual.
Hmm.
Me myself, I could speak for, and it never bothered me that I had to take a life because the other side of the coin is I'm saving a life. Otherwise, I wouldn't be justified. And I was saving a civilian or my partner or myself, and I had no problem living with it. I had no nightmares, no psychological effect in the negative. I felt actually victorious because I did what I was trained to do. They train you for that. And when the time came, I used my training and I did what I had to do. And I always worked in very proactive policing units. So we were on guard for that because we were dealing with violent criminals and that the likelihood of violence erupting was always there. You know, as an anti crime officer or doing anti crime work, you're supposed to be in the middle of the crime. You know, like if regular detective squads, they invest the case after the fact, and uniform officers deter crime by being their presence in uniform. But being anti-crime, you're supposed to be there while it occurs, and this way, not only can you stop the crime and save the victim, but you also testify, and your testimony is very important, and that has a more impact on a jury or a judge, where you can put the criminal away for a longer time, because a lot of uh, a lot of victims, they get nervous, they never testified before, they get scared, they misrepresent facts. But being an officer and testifying regularly and you seeing the crime, you know how to professionally testify where the case could come out with a better result.
True, that makes sense. Um, at that time, the seventies and into the eighties, more so the seventies, more so. Um, I mean, there was always rumors of, you know, some corruption going on in different precincts.
Well, the 70s capped a lot. There was a big corruption in actually 69 and 70 when I was coming on. It was the Knapp Commission, and they were arresting police officers. There was a big change in the culture, and it had a big effect on the job itself. But that was the Knapp Commission, something that there was a movie called Serpico where he exposed a lot of stuff, and the culture of policing changed during my time. Right when I was beginning, not during, but right at the beginning of my time. So it was a different atmosphere, and there was a culture prior, but the officers that I worked with and myself, we had no part of that, and it was that's when it started. With the commission, Knapp was a judge, and the mayor appointed him to have a committee to end police corruption, which was systematic going back into 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Oh, okay. Was there any other officer at your level that you worked with that you were happy, you were proud to work with? Any other decorated officers that you can remember that we
I
maybe?
remember a lot of the decorated officers that I worked with. I still in touch with quite a few of them. My partner, Timmy Kennedy, I talk to him every day, and I'm retired 41 years now. I still talk to him every day. Uh, Sadly, I go to some funerals of guys that I knew. Um, we go to reunions. We see the guys we used to work with. I'm in touch with a lot of the guys, actually, especially from the 4-1, because that was a very tight knit precinct.
Ah,
And there was a lot of camaraderie back then.
that was in the South or North Bronx?
That was in the South Bronx.
South
There
Bronx.
was a
Okay.
lot of camaraderie in the 41st precinct. It was a very unique precinct. It had a distinction and it had a reputation that was worldwide, uh, which became because of its violence there, but because of that movie that you mentioned, you know, Fort Apache, and also because my captain, Captain Tommy Walker, he wrote a couple of books on that called Fort Apache, and then he wrote another one, Return to Fort Apache, and it was a bestseller, and it profiled that high crime area and that violent area.
So I was always wondering, Fort Apache, they gave it that name because of the violent area. That maybe that's what the reason why they gave it
Well,
that?
no, the reason how it got the name actually, the name came about around 1968 or 69, right before I got there. And there was a Lieutenant Lloyd Gittens who passed away, may he rest in peace. But he was a lieutenant on the desk, and the precinct was under attack. And he was on the phone on the desk calling the borough office asking for more help. And they said, "How bad is it?" And he was screaming into the phone, and he screamed, "It's like Fort Apache." And officers heard it. The name stuck. And there's also a rumor at the time, I wasn't there, but they said that someone shot an arrow into the precinct. And then the name became synonymous with the precinct. and they had a logo of like a stick precinct with arrows going into it, and it became the logo for sweatshirts and T-shirts and jackets, and it just carried on all these years up to this day.
Oh, that's nice. It's interesting. I never
You
knew.
know, probably about 56 years, 57 years, and
Yeah.
it just and it was got known for the violence of the being attacked like that. I don't remember if there was any other precinct ever attacked like that. Today they do attack precincts, but not at the violence of that time.
Well, well, right now the 4-1 is that is it safer than it was before now, that area, or is it
A
still?
little safer. The landscape has changed. I've been down there numerous times, and they took away a lot of the tenement buildings. The actual block that the precinct is on, it was 1086 Simpson Street, and it's the 4-1 is still the only building standing. They took down on both sides of the streets all the tenement buildings and built single family attached homes with a little garden in front, 10 by 10, and all the streets, a lot of the buildings in the streets have been rebuilt and changed, and the streets are turned into one ways. Uh, but there's still a lot of crime down there. But the landscape looks totally different. Um, the South Bronx started burning down in 1975. They used to call it the Bronx is burning. There's been shows on that
Mhm.
from Engine 82, which is the busiest firehouse. It's on Intervale Avenue, which was in the confines of the 4-1. It was the busiest firehouse. I mean, those guys never got to sleep. They were out 24 hours a day. And that's when I actually left the 4-1 precinct, when I got promoted and went to the North Bronx. But in 1975, the decay was terrible. They were stripping the buildings. Landlords were walking away from the buildings because the people weren't paying rent and destroying the place. And then when the landlords left and the decent tenants left and junkies moved in, gangs moved in, they stripped out the piping. At one time, I think it was around 1980 or so, give or take a couple of years, they were selling those 5-story buildings for $1 a piece. But they needed total plumbing and electricity, and they owed back taxes. But the actual buildings you could purchase for $1.
Wow. Now I can imagine how much it's worth.
Now, yep, the people that had the money to invest and the foresight probably made a killing down there.
Oh yeah. You had if I'm correct, you had a nickname, right? Called Trigger Finger?
No,
Okay, maybe
no.
I heard it wrong. Okay.
Well, it was never a nickname. I never even heard that. But I have on my finger a
Oh,
tattoo
that's right. It's on your finger. I'm sorry.
on my trigger finger.
Finger.
I
Yeah.
have a tattoo that
Justified.
says, I'll show it to you if you can see it there. It's
Justified 4X. That's right.
justified 4 times.
Yeah.
I had to take 4 lives in the line of duty, and I went before the grand jury, and I got justified homicides, that I was justified in what I did on my record.
Right. That's what I meant to say.
Okay,
I said it wrong.
got me confused there.
Um, well, you also put out a book called Street Warrior
Yes,
around
that's
in 2017, which kind
same
of
time that the show came out. They're both available. I got to plug it again. They're both available on Amazon. And it
awesome.
went to audio, Kindle, hardcover, and paperback.
Right.
Still selling.
But you returned, you left, wait a minute, you returned to the force because you left, right? And then you returned back in 1983 or something
No,
like.
no, no. I worked until I got hurt in '83, August 1st.
That's right. Something
I
like
was in
that.
a hospital, and my official retirement date was January of '84. But I was hospitalized in a line of duty injury, and I was in the hospital 3 months, almost 3 months, and then I left in a wheelchair. And I would never be able to run again, so they retired me on a disability.
That's what it was. Okay.
Right.
But then you went into a different business altogether. You you went to help a friend of yours who was another cop, retired.
Yeah, he was a captain,
Yeah, Doug
Doug
Greenwood.
Greenwood. Yes,
And he had Bleecker Street Pizza.
that's correct. I worked there for like 10 years.
Right, that's like really interesting because you went from protecting people to flipping pizza, which is and you know what? I love Bleecker Street Pizza. I've been there. I love it.
Oh, you know it?
Oh my God, it's the best pizza. But what I mean, I know you went to help Doug, but what
Well, I
really
was very friendly with Doug, and I
yeah,
wanted to help him out. So I was helping him for a while, and then I became an employee. And he was a great guy, and sadly, he was affected very badly from the 9/11 attack because he was the he was the executive officer of the Manhattan South Task Force, and that covers the 9/11 area down there, the World Trade Center. And he was down there for the first 40 days, and he wound up years later getting very, very sick from that, and he wound up that he committed suicide because no one, the doctors couldn't help him. Uh, he used to get tremendous pain, and no one could cure him. But it was a 9/11 related illness.
wow. So
And he took his life about 4 years ago, and it was a sad ending. You know, he
well,
left the pizza store to his brother, and his brother sold it.
okay. Um, so how long were you with Doug in Bleecker Street?
Quite a few years.
But you, from what I remember, you had an incident or two while you were working there. There was some kind of a fight outside of it, and you went outside to stop it or something like that.
Well,
Something like
actually, there was quite a few fights there that I stopped,
this.
but one of them, there was a stabbing across the street, and I ran across the street and grabbed the guy for the police and stopped him from stabbing a guy. But there was quite a few fights down there.
And what was it like when people, patrons came in there and they discovered you were an officer at one time? Was there,
Well,
uh,
most people appreciated it.
yeah,
You know, they felt safe there, and I was very friendly with people down there. And uh, you know, I wasn't making pizza. I was more of a, I was the cashier, manager, security type thing.
okay, I got you.
Yeah, I
All
didn't make pizza actually.
right. Now, I mean, so being back, especially back in the 70s, I don't know how it was, but I'm curious, because there wasn't that many officers of the Jewish background. There wasn't that. I don't think there was that many that I can
Well,
remember.
the New York City police department is a very large force. Um, when I was on, there was like 38,000 cops. And the Shamram Society, which is the Jewish organization inside the police department, um, there was usually around 2,500. I mean, 2,500 is a small percentage of 38,000, but it is a lot of Jewish officers.
Hmm. Well, I meant around that time, in the
Yeah,
70s.
well, you
No.
know, it hasn't changed much. The the amount of people in the Jewish organization as compared to the amount of cops remain around the same percentage wise.
Ah,
If right now, if it's say it's dropped to maybe 34,000 cops or 33,000 cops, I know they're low now. Maybe the Shamram Society would be 2,000 instead of 2,500. The percentage remains around the same.
okay. So that,
It's a small percentage, but if you take the number 2,500 or 2,000, that's a lot of officers.
no, no, it is. Well, I mean, that organization you mentioned, that is an organization within the police department?
Well,
Or,
there's a fraternal organization
oh,
for
okay.
all ethnic backgrounds. You know, the blacks have an organization, the Italians, the Irish, the Jewish, the Latin. You know, they all have a. There's probably around, I guess, at around 26 organizations.
Oh, okay. And they're all affiliated to the police department.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Uh,
they you join them, and it's they have their own meetings and cover their own concerns and have their own picnics and holiday things, whatever their holiday
Is
requires.
is it like a farm team kind of a thing where they can bring in possible recruits or no?
Well, I'm sure each one of them tries to recruit for their own. Yes.
Okay,
They might put out, we'd like more Latino officers, or we want more Jewish officers, or more Black officers. You know, it's just like a fraternal organization.
right.
They'll have, um, they'll have fishing trips and Christmas parties or Hanukkah parties or Kwanzaa parties or whatever their ethnic background, following is. But they'll also do outings to baseball games, events
No, I got
that
it.
they organize, and that you could just fraternize with your own ethnic people if you want.
Well, going back to what you mentioned before, to get us a little even more up to date, what's happening today. Um, in lieu of what's been happening, with the police. Myself, I love the police department. I support them very much, and I appreciate what they do. Regardless of what I did when I was young, that's another story.
But most people appreciate the police. But it's like the squeaky wheel effect. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So it's a small percentage of the population, but they're the most loudest. And they do the protesting, they do all the screaming and all this. And but there is a larger culture today where they disrespect the police, but decent people still do. Who else? The police are protecting you. They're willing to take a bullet for a stranger. You know, uh, and most people appreciate that. But then they're decent people that go to work and live their lives. But then you have these other ones that uh, are on picket lines and protesting, which is more today. I don't call it protesting. They go to the level of rioting. They destroy statues, they break windows, they destroy businesses. That's not protesting. They're rioters.
Right, that's true. Um, I'm curious in what you think today's police officers, who unfortunately, like you said, the amount of people go recruits have dwindled. A lot of people, a lot of guys are retiring early. A lot of guys, it's very hard to get new recruits in because of what's happening.
That's
Like,
true.
right.
You're 100% right on that.
And
The
what?
police take a lot of abuse. Uh, they're told to stand down. And in reality, the public should be happy that there's men and women that want to do this job. But a lot of people, it's getting harder, and the ranks are dwindling because of the atmosphere and the cultures of today.
Well, when I've met a lot of officers in Manhattan when I go to Brooklyn and Queens, and sometimes I pass by and I tell them thank you for your service, things like that.
They love hearing that, and they appreciate that.
But I'm wondering what goes through when I've watched videos of
I
these
know we all have seen them.
riots and stuff, where I see other people protesting, getting in the officer's face, or they spitting at him, or whatever the case may be. I'm wondering, I'm wondering what goes through their mind. I feel bad for the officers because I'm wondering what it does to their mentality. Like, what am I doing? Should I
What
keep?
really goes through their mind is they
I'm,
probably like to crack those people right in the head. But the administrations, I mean, we're talking, politics now. This comes from the president all the way down. They're told to stand down. They don't want police action. Uh, the officers want to do the job, and they don't like. No one likes taking abuse like that. I've stood on picket lines, but when it got to a certain point, on riot lines, then we had to take action, and clear the street. But they let people take over these streets. They disrupt traffic. They stop people from going to work or coming home. They stop emergency vehicles from going to fires or picking up heart attack victims. They jam up the traffic. There's a certain point where they have to move, but the administrations let them go too long and close down the streets. And they order the officers to stand down. I know what's going through their head, and I know what they'd like to do. You know, they could clear, the NYPD is capable of doing any job, but not if you get orders not to do it. And they're told to stand down and close streets and let them do this. And they don't want to confront them. But that's not the police officers, that's the higher administration and politics.
Right. But that, does that bring the morale down of the officers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's bringing the morale down. And like you said before, that's why they have a hard time recruiting and people are leaving in droves. Guys don't want to work past 20 hours. They get their overtime in and they're fed up with it and they retire. And not only that, that hurts older guys that have experience and knowledge training the new guys. So the new guys are getting brainwashed with what they're teaching the academy, where you learn certain things in the academy which are good, but then you go on the street when it's real, and the old timers and the veterans, they teach you how it's done, and this is not happening because they're leaving, and that has to do with the morale.
Right, that's a shame.
An
So,
absolute shame.
so, so do you think there's any kind of turnaround maybe where
Well,
for the police department, for the NYPD to be at its level that it was maybe?
they'll have to be at some point. They'll either the administrations will change or it'll change when these politicians get mugged or their wives or daughters or sons and they want to change. There have to be a policy changes. Otherwise, the pendulum always swings. So right now it's on one way. It'll come back the other way. There has to be. Otherwise, what are we going to do? Go back to the jungle?
Yeah, I know.
They'll require law and order at some point, just like when it got out of control and then Giuliani came in and then he left and then things switch. The pendulum always swings. It'll swing the other way.
You just reminded me of something I never asked you earlier. In your time on the street and what you were in as an officer, did you ever come in contact with higher ups, let's say in the mob or drug cartels, Mexicans or whatever? Did you ever have to confront any people of that level?
Yeah, I had a lot to do with the Purple Gang had a headquarters in the North Bronx, and I dealt with them a lot. I locked up a lot of them for guns and stuff, mostly guns. But I didn't have stuff like on the level of John Gotti in your area. He was a Howard Beach guy. We didn't have. I didn't. I didn't work in that kind of area where the mob guys lived and operated, except for the Purple Gang. They didn't live in our area, but they had like a headquarters there. They had a social club. But that was in the North Bronx, by the way. The South Bronx was very different. It was a low level street crime thing, street robberies and rapes and burglaries. It was just a violent area. The upper echelon of the mafia really didn't deal with that. They were on a higher level, but I didn't really deal with them.
As a matter of fact, the Purple Gang was a lot of Jewish guys.
Well, the mob used to be Jewish. Murder Incorporated, the Italians hired the Jews to do the killing.
That's right.
Murder Incorporated was all Jewish. You had Meyer Lansky. That was going way back, though.
Yeah,
Before my time, or yours.
For the Purple Gang per se, I know we're a bunch of Jewish guys. A lot of them.
No, they were Italians, the one I dealt with.
Oh, okay. Now you know what I'm thinking about? I'm sorry. There was another Purple Gang in Detroit. Those were all the Jewish guys.
Oh, maybe.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but that was decades before.
Yes, that was a little bit, a little bit before that. Yeah. But that just goes to show you how tough the Jewish guys are.
Well, they can,
cops or cops.
the Jews had their own mafia. They controlled the garment industry, but that was in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Every ethnic background has their own, what they call mafia thing, of course.
That's true. Well, before we would get to the end of the show, outside of what you told us earlier about Street Warrior, outside of that, besides that, do you also do guesting, speaking engagements at
I've had a few, yes.
at schools or anything, like maybe high
Well,
school?
no, more in organizations. I do book signings and stuff. I was doing book signings for a while. I'm doing now some personal bodyguard security work. You know.
Really? You're doing bodyguard, secure work
Oh
again?
yeah, still do it.
So in
Right.
other words, Ralph is still tough. He hasn't stopped yet.
Not yet. I'm still got a little left.
God bless. That's great. Um, well, any book signings that are coming up that people should know about?
Well, on October 20th, I'm doing a book signing in the 107 precinct.
And
Uh,
where's
that's in Queens, Parsons Boulevard. They're doing a actually they're opening. It's open, but they're going to do like an official opening of a. It's a Sunday from 12 to 4, October 20th. They're making the precinct into a historical event. They're going to have like a museum. There used to be a police museum down in Manhattan near the Fulton Fish Market when it was there, but it got wiped out with Sandy when that storm came in. They never rebuilt it. So this Queens precinct is doing 3 floors of police memorabilia. They're going to have the old police cars come out there, and I'm doing a book signing out there.
Oh, awesome. That's not
I
far
think
from,
it's called in the Springfield section of Queens, the 107 precinct
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
on Parsons Boulevard.
yeah, Parsons Boulevard. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yes,
I was just over there today. I was at Parsons Boulevard in Jamaica. So not too far from there.
not too far.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't really know Queens, but I'll be going out there October 20th.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I gotta take note of that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Ralph, listen, thank you very much for coming on. It was very
Thank
interesting.
you very much for having me.
No, it was a pleasure, and I wish you luck on everything.
Thank you
And,
very much.
and hopefully we'll meet up, maybe October 20th.
Okay, that'd be great.
Awesome.